I am very glad to be here. And the truth is, I'm glad to be anywhere. The stats are horrifying. They say, well, the FBI actually has put out a stat, it's been out for a while, that the average lifespan of a victim of sex trafficking is 7 years. My sex trafficking began, my earliest memory is at age 6, though I have some memories kind of scarce at age 4. This was done under the nose of my parents, who were middle income, middle average family, but you know, there are some markers that made me a prospect to those that are looking. One of them was I wasn't close to my dad. And that makes you vulnerable. The other is, and I don't know quite how they pick up on this except pure evil, is I had an uncle who had molested me at age 4. So that already sets you up. And at age 6, someone very close to the family brought me in to a trafficking ring. Trafficking rings are getting more and more attention. I can tell you that mine is very much on the level of what we've heard at Pedophile Island or the Epstein case. Everything that happened to me was under the nose of my parents. They had no idea what was going on. There wasn't the term trafficking back then. In fact, really, we weren't talking about sexual abuse. And because of that, my parents were very ignorant. I was also, sad to say, this ring was very, very savvy. They were not your, you know, we tend to think of traffickers as being like the Romeo pimps, which those are there, who traffic out their spouses or girlfriends, or the streetwalkers and so on. But what's right under our nose, everywhere, is ring trafficking. When I first brought up ring trafficking, and by the way, that is criminal organizations. It's the mob. It is. It's very organized. And they're very tech savvy. And they know how to get a child and how to mess with a child's head. And I'm just going to share this with you. I know some of it's hard to hear, but it's not nearly as hard, I'm told, as the first 2 chapters of my book. But and I try to make jokes. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're not. You can laugh, even though this is a serious topic, if I say something stupid or funny. Don't laugh if I'm being serious. It's going to mess me up. No. Being brought into the ring, the first memory, and this is a little hard to hear, but at age 6, someone very close to the family, very high up, not just in our community, but in our state. I'm from South Dakota. And he's very well known, a philanthropist and so on, very well liked, had been grooming me, unbeknownst to me and my family, for quite a while, and was just a very good friend to the family, and he favored me. And because I wasn't close to my dad, being favored by an adult male who everyone looked up to felt good. And so I trusted him. I was allowed to spend the night at their house because he had a daughter my age and things like that. It eventually turned into molestation, and then I have the memory at age 6 of being brought into a building where there were men sitting in a circle, and they passed me around the circle and molested me, each one of them. But here's what they did to mess with my mind. You're 6 years old, you don't know what to call this thing that's happening to you in the first place. These are adults and all respected. High up in the community, there was a judge in the room, and I don't remember who else was there, to be honest. And they say these things. We know your family, and then they name my sister by name. And if you don't show up whenever we ask you to show up, we'll go after your sister. Now that was my baby sister, who I had prayed into this world. There was no way I was going to let them take my sister. Then they named my parents, and they said, we can easily kill your parents. I believed them. They had so much power in that one room. But the third thing that really messed me up is when they took the onus of their horrible behavior and put it on me. When they said, and you're too sexy. We can't help ourselves. A 6-year-old is not sexy. I didn't really even know what sexy meant. What I heard was, this is your fault. So now they added shame to terror. that began many years of them controlling my life. I bring water with me everywhere because unknown to many people is you can actually Google non-state torture and you will find the 48 common techniques used to torture trafficking survivors or, well, victims. Of the 48, I endured 44 that I remember. I added some to their list, and one of them was withholding food and water. And so to this day, water for me is literally life. You'll see it with me wherever I go, or some liquid, but especially water. If you go 3 days without water, while being tortured, let me tell you, the shards in your throat, the cracking of your lips, I could go on and on. The eyes, how much they hurt, it's just awful. I weighed 95 pounds, and if I gained 2 or 3 pounds, then punishment was being chained to the wall and starved. This is real common. And this, by the way, is one of the least horrific things that I could tell you about. You're welcome to Google those if you wish. Another statistic that I want us to understand, most of you, well, all of you are definitely on the right. You're conservative, but most of you, if not all of you, are also believers. Next to abortion, there is nothing else on this planet that is killing more human beings than trafficking, when statistically only 1 to 2% of us survive. 1 to 2%. Can you think of anything else that kills that many people? So I am here as a miracle, and I know that. It took me a long time to put my book out and it's called From Trafficked to Treasured. You can get it on Amazon, and I do have copies here. I wrote that book terrified 2 years ago. As I first began speaking to the legislature in the state of South Dakota, the first thing that happened to me, and you can probably tell by looking that it's been a few years since I was trafficked. I got out when I was almost 22 years old. The first thing that happened is I got a phone call from the very ring in South Dakota that had trafficked me from age 17 to age 22. A phone call on my cell. All these decades later, I knew they hadn't lost track of me, but that was a terrifying moment. And the next few times I spoke anywhere, they sent me a text calling me by one of my stage names, just letting me know that they know. I'm old enough now, it didn't shut me up. But I couldn't have put this book out even 10 years ago because of the fear. Overcoming that fear is huge because over my lifetime with them, I've watched them not only torture me, but there are individuals that I don't know if they lived because of what I saw them do. I have seen things that no human being should have to see done to another human being. The only thing I could compare it to would be if you took Auschwitz and Mengele, what he did, and you added horrendous sexual abuse to that, that's just pretty much never ending, then you have a semblance of what happens to especially those trafficked by rings. There is a book out, believe it or not, or two, telling traffickers how to torture. And sadly, I believe it's available on Amazon. Yep, David's given me the nod.
What's it called?
I don't know what it's called. I just know that it's on Amazon, and I'd hate to give it any credence, but I'm not really sure, actually.
There's quite a few.
There's quite a few. Oh, that makes sense to me. There's quite a few. And I'm going to let David give all the stats on all of this stuff, but as that 1 to 2%, when I learned that stat, when I learned what a miracle I really was, then I recognized I had a duty. I had a duty to my fellow brothers and sisters that are currently captive and those that are free. But then I realized I also have a duty to those who know nothing about trafficking. I had a duty to explain what it looks like, not the streetwalker, which everyone knows about, which is very visible. But what about what we call the deep state? What about what's happening under our very nose. My clients were anything. And I wish one of the bikers was here, because I even had motorcycle clubs. And this is something that I wasn't looking for, but a beautiful Christian man in Hollywood who's a producer got a hold of me. And long story short, if you name one of the top 5, I have talked to them because of him. And 3 of the top 5 production companies in Hollywood are working on developing a film and a TV series based on my life. I've been asked if I'm going to write a second book, because my book really has the PG rating. I wrote this book to expose ring trafficking. I wrote it to educate those who know nothing. I wrote it for the families of people that they don't understand, teenagers that are being accused, like I was, of being rebellious. When really rebellion wasn't what was happening in me. I was broken, destroyed. I was acting okay. I mean, I was involved in every possible sport, and I was a cheerleader, and I was, the freshman princess, and I was on anything you could do, drama, it didn't matter. Why? Because the more I stayed involved, the less they had their hands on me. The less I was available. Because everything about ring trafficking is to keep it secret, to not be discovered, to keep the victim programmed so that they are out there living a life. If you saw me smile, I have pictures of me back then, you would never imagine that what was going on. But I was used in every possible way. Porn, the first porn that I remember very clearly was at age 9, that they were photographing me in films with adult males at age 9 years old. And see, my parents still had no idea. My parents are alive today, they've read the book, they have a lot of pain, and that's not what I wanted to happen. But eventually I had to decide to go above what it was going to do to my family, who love me very much. And they're Christians. They weren't back then, though. See, that also made me a little bit, or maybe a lot bit, open to what happened, because they were partiers back then. So I had a lot of time on my hands, a lot of time to be available. They used me in escort, exotic dance, put me in hotels. That was punishment. I was traded to motorcycle clubs. By the way, that's extremely common. The syndicated crime that runs ring trafficking and motorcycle clubs work together, and that is one of the things that we're hoping to expose in the film, because that is not known to most people. Private parties, I entertained movie stars, I entertained rock bands that you probably still listen to today. I was taken out of the country. See, once I was out of my parents' home, they had me 24/7. So I was taken out of the country. In my memory, and memories come and they keep coming and they keep coming. So at this point, I can say I know for certain that I stayed literally in the, I don't know if you'd call it a palace or what, of a head of a nation in South America. And he was one of the presidents, he was the president of that nation, used me to blackmail the heads of states of 2 other nations. That I remember, and that was filmed. Were there other heads of state? I don't know. Most of us learn that these things, when they come flooding, they come flooding, and you don't go looking for memories. I never have looked for memories. I didn't think I had any. I didn't think I had any that were blocked, because the programmers are so good at programming you to forget. And I did forget to look there. Okay, so in a few seconds we'll do question and answer. Well, I'm going to give you this scenario. If you are at all from a small community, you will recognize this, and if you are not, you may not have ever seen or heard this. But in small communities in the Midwest, just kind of across the board, a siren goes off to tell you it's 6 p.m. in the community. The city sirens go off, or in the neighborhood. Some of you are shaking your head, yes. Okay. So I would get out of school roughly 3 p.m. And in small communities, you don't lock your doors, you don't lock your cars, everybody trusts everybody. I grew up in many of those communities. My dad was in the government, and so we moved a lot. They moved him. Every time he moved, it was a raise. I believe the government was involved probably in what was happening to me. I can't prove that. But they sure found us no matter what state we lived in. But in that small community, when they first were grooming me and moving me into this, that siren goes off at 6 o'clock. I'm out of school at 3. I have 3 hours where nobody cares where I am. They assume I'm playing with friends. And many days, maybe most days, I was playing with friends. But then there were the days that I was met at the side of the playground by somebody, a man, and told to come. And when I had to go, I had to go. I knew better than to say no. I found out at 13, when I started to exercise my right to say no, that saying no meant gang rape. And that is a horrendous thing to suffer. That's punishment. And again, one of their less severe, believe it or not. I survived though, and I'm here. And I'm not going away unless God takes me home. And I better end there by the clock so that I can take a couple of questions. Yes, ma'am.
So as a mother of children, it's chilling to me to hear that this happened under your parents' nose. How can you tell parents to recognize that it might be happening with your own children? How do you know?
Thank you for asking that. Actually, on our website, which is treasuredlives.net, there are others, but I highly recommend ours because I tried to take the language that is out there written for, it's just too complicated, first of all. A lot of what's out there, these are the signs to look for. And then we all look at them and go, oh, that doesn't fit. So I have made my own list based on my life and the lives of others that I know. It's also in the back of the book, but it's on that website, treasuredlives.net. And it gives you some symptoms and signs to watch for. You see, we need your eyes. We need your heart. It took one person looking me in the eyes and seeing a human being. When I was ready to give up, I had tried escaping so many times. The punishment was too severe to continue trying to escape. And then somebody looked me in the eyes and saw me as a human being. When you see someone out there scantily clothed, when you see someone that doesn't measure up maybe to what your standards are, and you think, why are they dressing so seductive? Maybe they're being forced. Or maybe something awful has happened to them in the past. And if you can look them in the eye and smile, you do not know what seed you may plant by that small action. And it's just doing what God has called us to do. Love others. If we love through our eyes, because it is too dangerous to step into that zone if you suspect trafficking. It's too dangerous to get in the middle of that. But if you could just show love. And if you really suspect, dial 911.
Kelly, I'm sorry to ask so many questions here, but the sex education programs in our schools, do you believe that they are helping to groom people toward finding this to be okay or reducing the defensiveness?
I'm really torn on, okay, so we have sex education that's hideous and is teaching them things that they shouldn't even know. What I would rather see us doing is, and then you have to make certain you have the right people. I would love to see, and this is what we're doing, I've spoken at several schools, is having the education come from someone who has lived through it, or law enforcement often speaks with me, and individuals like that who have the knowledge that David Straight does, to speak to that in a way that is giving the children a trained eye and a concern, rather than teaching them sex education and how to have safe sex, etc. You know, it's gotten to where children, I don't think they're afraid of sex at all. And what are we doing? I'm terrified we're making them vulnerable. You know, I'm glad we do the safe touch stuff and some of that training. But we've got to clean this up and come up with something that is going to reduce the amount of victims, rather than what we're doing right now, which, yeah, I've gotten in trouble with schools pulling my kids out of some of those classes, so.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up question, but you know, I'm struck by I was 6 years old, all that under your parents' nose, and you were threatened not to tell the truth. How do you give a child in that situation to say what's happening? How do you help them tell you what's happening?
And that's I've been asked that a few times actually, and it is a really difficult one to even answer because I don't think there was anything that would have promoted me to speak. But possibly because I've run across these individuals who had someone try to groom one of their children, but they had such a close relationship with both parents, and I think that is a huge key right there. But also the child had been taught about good touch, bad touch. I've never heard anything like that. I think that is one thing that is really important that we're teaching our children, and we should be teaching at home as young as they can possibly understand. And the child needs to know it doesn't matter who it is. If it doesn't feel safe, you need to tell mommy or daddy, even if it's mommy or daddy. Because we know that familial trafficking is huge as well, along with sexual abuse. They've got to know what it means to be private and what it means to not have bad touch. And again, I say, as young as they could possibly understand it, teach it at home. And you had a question, I believe, Felisa? No?
I just wanted to say that on the way here, I was actually on a plane ride, and I sat with a gentleman who was pretty high up in Boy Scouts of America. And we had a very candid conversation, and you guys all know who I am, I'm kind of a big mouth, so of course I asked the question, hey, what about all the, child sex crimes and everything that was happening? And one of the things that he had said was, there's some really bad people out there. And he said, there's just some really bad people out there. And I said, what do we do? And he said, we need to educate them and empower them. And, you're saying you're not really sure if you would have. But my question to you is, have you teamed up with anyone outside of child trafficking or like the Boy Scouts and other people outside of that who might be able to, in a loud voice, kind of send out that message to kids that we acknowledge this is a thing? Because we can't even get our real news media to acknowledge that it's a thing. And that's the problem, guys.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
How many people have believed you?
So I'm connected with the Child Advocacy Center in our area, and then I'm also on the West River Human Trafficking Task Force in South Dakota. I'm also going to just put in this plug. I'm very good friends and head up the prayer for Governor Kristi Noem. I know most of you know who she is. And she is a very good friend, and I said, I'm going to say your name today because she has been such a promoter of battling this very thing. And I want you all to know before I move on that she is everything you think she is and more. She is the most sincere, a beautiful human being. There's nothing fake about that woman, and Deep State could never own her either. I just want you to know that. So in talking to all of them, to answer your question, all of us are somewhat bewildered because even with the safe touch training, and I'm hoping David has some answers, because we have, I'm sitting with law enforcement, and the state's attorney is a friend, and so on, and we're trying to understand how do we make this stop. I think most of it begins with the parents, if not all of it, because the parents have got to be in relationship with their children, not be so busy that they are out of touch with what's going on in the brain of their child. And then I always add this, don't assume, oh, they've just hit that age and they're being rebellious. That is probably one of the worst, because we know the average age is right around 12 to 13 where children end up trafficked. And that age happens to be when we go, oh, they're just being rebellious. We've got to get that whole idea of rebellion out of our head. It is not natural for a child to just suddenly turn this age and want to rebel against their parents. There's something underlying. Most children want the approval of their parents. So if they're doing something that looks rebellious, let's find out why. So really, it's getting the message out. And I really am not trying to promote my book for the sake of promoting the book, but I'm telling you a lot of that info is in there, and I want it to get to people through anybody's voice, including my own, to understand some of these basic things, along with understanding the dissociation that happens, so that you can watch for those signs as well. And I actually do training on dissociation because it's so common, and it's one of the things that hides trafficking so much. So, kind of an answer?
At what age did your parents find out, and what did they do?
When the book came out 2 years ago? Right before the book. I warned them before the book came out. It was really a hard, they're old, they're lovely people, and that was probably the hardest thing for me in the world, was to tell my parents. But you know, the first thing that happened is my mother began to remember a whole bunch of incidents that all of a sudden made sense. Incidents that she wished she would have investigated, things that she saw. My whole family, actually, including a cousin, had so many things to validate and to put into that all. But they're doing okay with it because they're very proud of what I'm doing now. So,
We're running up against.
Yeah, we gotta go. We gotta go.
Yeah.